Imagine, if you will, an old-timey newspaper office in a mid-sized Midwestern town in October 1902. There's typewriters click-clacking away. Although, to be fair, I don't actually know if typewriters were prevalent at this time. There's a hustle and bustle. Everyone is doing their level best, get their paper out on time. It's an election season, so there's plenty to talk about.
Uh-oh.
When in walks the local reverend, just to pay a visit, happy as you like. But I imagine that there's this record scratch of all the employees who stop and they gape at the visitor. That's the Reverend Wix. And everyone knows that the Wixes are staunch Republicans through and through.
Oh.
Doesn't he know this is a Democratic newspaper? The good Reverend saunters over to the editor, shakes his hand with a smile, and they both proceed to chat congenially. It would seem they had a new story for tomorrow's paper. I'm Karyn Harding.
And I'm Kim McMasters.
And this is Low Ancestry. Welcome, Kim.
Welcome, Karyn.
Whoa. That was an energy of two people who are without their sound engineer.
Yeah, and we're doing the best we can, but Ben is crucial.
We set up this whole situation today by ourselves with no help.
Mm-hmm.
We can't be held responsible for what comes out of this.
We absolutely cannot.
And also, we skipped our last release date, and that's because our audio engineer is gallivanting across Alaska.
Probably riding a moose.
And we've been totally fine and normal.
We've been totally fine and normal.
So,
It was a busy time, but we're back.
we're back. And we're back, not just with any episode. We're back with our part 2 about the crazy Wix family of Pleasant Gap, Missouri.
Crazy is
Crazy.
crazy is crazy. I mean,
What would you like me to say?
intricate, complicated,
Yeah.
detailed.
Detail-oriented problem solver.
Problem solver. I don't know. Fine. Crazy's fine.
Crazy's fine. Last time,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about a man named Joseph Wix, who is considered the pioneer of this family due to the fact that he had ventured to the frontier as a young man and squatted on acres of land that became Pleasant Gap, Missouri,
Mm-hmm.
and where generations of Wixes became fixtures of the community,
Mm-hmm.
or Wixters of the community. Is that anything?
That's everything.
Thank you. We learned that Joseph was a Union-backing Republican, and during the Civil War, he was pushed out for 3 years out of Missouri due to the crazy amount of guerrilla fighting in the area. And then when he came back after the war, he participated in post-war Union and Confederate squabbles. And by Union, I don't mean like Teamsters. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean the North. One of the squabbles that he had with the previous Confederate rebels was that he murdered a man.
Yeah.
And a jury of his peers found him not guilty
Yeah.
of murder by
Mhm.
reason of self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph lives out the rest of his life being involved in his town as a justice of the peace and then a judge, as well as being an outspoken Republican in the politics of the area until he passes in 1895, having had 3 marriages and about 18 children.
Hey.
Hey.
That's too many.
Too many children.
Cool it.
Today, we're going to talk mainly about 2 of his children. And funnily enough, their names are Lewis and Clark.
That's so sick.
I know. So,
Okay.
Clark and Lewis Wix.
Surely they're not as they're not pioneers in the same way.
No, they're not pioneers in the same way.
No.
There is actually no resemblance at all.
Great.
We'll talk briefly about your second great-grandfather, but he is neither of these 2 gentlemen. He was also relatively unexciting. So sorry about it. I know. What are you going to do? We've already talked at length about Joseph's affinity for local politics, and he held several town positions: postmaster, justice of the peace, judge, yada, yada. And this line of public service inspires his own children, specifically a one Clark Wix. And we will get to his illustrious political career, all while discussing the evolution of the two-party political system of the country and how partisanship was tearing at the fabric of families long before our recent elections. Woo. Woo. So let's jump in. This is going to be a very political episode, but hopefully you'll find it interesting.
What a nice break from real life.
So sorry. I'm sorry that this is who I am.
You became Canadian.
I know, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
And then I was just Irish.
Yeah. We're going up.
Go up, we're going down. I cautioned in the last episode, it will be tempting to start categorizing these characters. It's good and bad. But as we'll find out, they all fit into a very gray category where we can praise them for good choices and then promptly chastise them for bad ones. But we always got to start with origins. And since Clark was born first, we'll start with him. After Joseph Wix puts down roots around 1839 in his home of Pleasant Gap, he marries the daughter of another pioneer by the name of Sarah Beatty. They begin having children in 1842, another in 1844, then 1847, and then on a cold day in February 1850, they give birth to a baby boy, Clark Wix. Kim, would you like to know what else is going on in 1850?
This is my favorite part. If you speed that up, it's going to sound normal.
This is my favorite part.
What was the inspiration for that, do you think?
Honestly, Quima.
Oh, from
Just
K-pop
like,
Demon Hunter, our new personality.
Yeah, our new personality,
Yeah.
K-pop Demon Hunter.
I'm this close to singing Soda Pop into this microphone right now.
When we said we're going up, I literally was like, up. Okay, we can't do this.
We can't.
But could we?
1850.
1850.
Los Angeles and San Francisco are incorporated as cities of California.
Oh, the way my mind autofilled to are beefing together, because I feel like
Like they were having a war.
you always say that people are beefing during this portion.
I don't know, because I wrote this so long ago. There's a possibility I have it written somewhere.
Hopefully they're friends.
Well, yeah, but someone else could be beefing.
Yeah.
The Taiping Rebellion in China breaks out, which was their own civil war led by Hong Tzu-chun, who styled himself as the brother of Jesus Christ.
Oh,
Yeah, I know.
huh.
Oh,
You can just do that?
apparently.
Huh. How about that?
Yeah, about that. The fugitive slave law passes in the U.S., meaning that enslaved people who escape to a free state must be returned to a slave state. Consequently, Harriet Tubman becomes the official conductor of the Underground Railroad in this same year. So there is a hero among us.
Yeah.
A controversial Iranian prophet known as Bab is executed by firing squad in Persia for claiming to be a prophet.
Whoa.
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And then also, Madame Tussaud, the wax lady, dies.
Oh, sad.
I know, but she had a good career.
I mean, presumably she was doing wax already.
yeah, she probably was waxing herself in a horrible accident. No. I think she died of
Can you
old age.
imagine?
I can.
That's a horror movie waiting to happen.
I guess so.
I know House of Wax is like a thing already, but this is a different house.
This is a different house.
This is a different house
wax.
of different wax. We're talking about the Wix, not the wax.
We know a little bit about Clark's childhood and growing up years because he writes more than one nostalgia piece in newspapers at the end of his life. He talks about his father growing corn and selling it for 10 cents a bushel in town. He talks about threshing wheat with a flail, fanning it in the wind, and tramping the oats with horses.
Oh, wow.
And then he says he used to ride horses bareback without even a sheepskin or quilt until he got sore. So,
Whoa.
bully for you.
Yeah, cool brag.
Cool brag. And then I have a favorite memory of his, which, Kim, I will have you read, actually.
Is a nostalgia piece a like common thing that was happening where it's just like a guy writing about his memories?
No, Clark became kind of important. That's a spoiler.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So people wanted to hear about his childhood.
So this is one of his...
Yeah, this is like a excerpt from it.
I have been in Old Pleasant Gap on Saturday afternoons and have seen a dozen drunks, and soon some fellow would announce that he was the best man in town. and it was sure to be disputed. And from 1 to a half dozen fights would follow as a result of a lot of bad booze. But all this has changed, and Pleasant Gap is surrounded by good, law-abiding Christian people who frown on such things. And all are prosperous, good citizens, and all believe in good roads, good churches, schoolhouses, and neat, well-improved farms.
The big four.
Good God, let's eat.
Good. I can't tell if he's like lamenting that the drunks of the past are gone, or if he's like,
I think it's probably it's probably just like, look what we did, we're better.
yeah, we have good roads now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But best man in town, I announced that I'm the best man in town is like so funny.
It's such a funny idea of like 5 guys in a town of like 20 people.
I'm the number one guy
I'm
in the town.
number one guy in the town.
Is he the reverend?
No.
Okay. Interesting. It's a nice snapshot.
It's a nice
But
snapshot.
I do kind of wonder if he's like, there's just no fun anymore.
That was my thought, but he's like, and he wrote that piece either after Prohibition is already started, but definitely within like the Prohibition era or like the temperance era. So it could be that he's like, this happened, isn't that crazy? But look at us now.
Yeah.
Prohibited.
Yeah. But like maybe in a good way?
Maybe in a good way.
Interesting. I got to find out more about him.
For sure, though, we know that this was a very pioneer childhood without any modern amenities.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he had never seen a mowing machine until his father brought one to the farm in 1857. Something else that came in 1857, Kim, was his younger brother, Lewis Wix. Kim, would you like to know what else is going on in the world in 1857?
Yeah. Oh my God, a twofer.
A twofer!
This is also my favorite part.
I should have been doing twofers on all the other twofer episodes before.
That's okay. Now we know.
Now I know. The University of Calcutta is established in India, and also Gallaudet University in the States is the first school with advanced education for deaf folks.
Whoa, cool.
The largest slave auction in U.S. history is held in Savannah, Georgia, and is dubbed, quote, the weeping time, where 436 men, women, children, and infants are sold after being kept in horse stalls for weeks beforehand. The horrible,
Oh my God.
horrible time.
Oh.
After U.S. mercenary William Walker takes and rules Nicaragua by force, he's overthrown in 1857 by Honduran General Florencio Zatruch.
Ooh, Zatrush.
The first ever meeting between the shogun of Japan and a foreign diplomat occurs.
Cool.
And then Bucharest becomes the world's first city to have its streets illuminated by kerosene lamps.
Oh.
That's nice. Lewis Wix was born on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, 1857. And his mother was also Sarah Beatty.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah Beatty dies on May 6th, 1857.
Oh, tough.
So Lewis's entree into the world comes in a pretty tragic way.
Yikes.
There's a bio about Lewis's life that claims his mother didn't die until he was actually 3 days old, but whether it was 1, 2, or 3 days,
Yeah, it's still.
we
oof.
can guess that her death was due to birth complications.
Yeah.
Because of this tragedy, Lewis had a very different childhood from the Little House on the Prairie one that Clark describes. So immediately, Lewis is actually sent away from his family as a baby and all of his siblings to go live with his aunt and uncle, Joseph and Fanny Beatty. And it's actually his aunt and uncle who raise him to maturity. My guess is that because he was an infant and there was no like woman in the house,
Oh, yeah.
they sent him somewhere where he could be taken care of.
Yeah.
And the other kids were probably old enough to do work.
Yeah. Oof.
Now, to be fair, the census data does show that Lewis did actually live with his father, Joseph, and his new wife, Eliza, in 1860, a few years later. But the way that Lewis talks about his life later is he just mentions his aunt and uncle as like, even at the end, I think the obituary at the end of his life talks about them as being his adoptive parents.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
he does live with his father, I believe, some of the time.
Maybe this is just a movie trope, but like child comes into the world, mother dies immediately after, and then
Yeah.
there's like a sense of blame.
Mm-hmm. It could be like that.
And then they were just like, we can't look at you.
I know. I would hate for that to be the case.
I know.
It very much could be. But also, like, if you're living in the middle of nowhere
Mm-hmm.
and you have a farm and you're just
And a newborn.
a dude,
You're
with,
just a dude.
with like 6 other kids.
And a newborn.
Yeah.
And no formula, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So his aunt and uncle actually live in a different town than Pleasant Gap. It's a place called Deepwater. It's actually about 30 miles away, which I think is pretty significant, 30 miles back in that time. It means that Lewis probably didn't have regular contact with his father or any of his siblings while growing up. But both boys did leave Missouri during the Order Number 11 during the Civil War. If you remember, that's the one where they were like, hey, there's too much like off the record fighting.
Yeah.
We don't
Everybody get out.
Everybody just get out of my house.
Get out.
Get out of my house. Lewis was about 5 or 6 at that time, and Clark was 13 or 14.
Okay.
But living with his aunt and uncle, either during this time or later, seems to have made a significant difference on the type of person that Lewis grew up to be, especially in comparison to his brother Clark. Clark paints a picture of a very like outdoorsy pioneer childhood. And though Lewis did grow up on a farm, his childhood is described very differently. In a biography of his life, Lewis is described as a kid who loved to read and loved his studies. He spent most nights reading and doing his schoolwork by the light of the fireplace, because most pioneers' houses didn't even have the luxury of candles. So he's like next to the fireplace writing his little homework. And also, Lewis's Aunt Fanny came from a very religious family. Her father, Joseph Beaver, was one of the earliest reverends in the area, founding a church called Double Branch Church, which is one of the oldest churches in the area. And as we'll find out later, this connection likely had a profound effect on Lewis. But I think the difference between the two brothers is already becoming pretty clear. And something I find interesting is that both Lewis and Clark represent different aspects of Joseph. Last episode, we learned that Joseph was this hardened pioneer who lived in the middle of nowhere before a town even existed and made all his own clothes and bricks and whatever. But we also learned that Joseph was a local school teacher at times and saw value in the learned pursuits. Joseph was also political, and he had been the postmaster and justice of peace. And this proclivity for the political arena wormed its way into Clark. Clark, now 21 in the year 1871, has previously been working as a farmhand on his father's farm, but it's time for him to be an independent boy, which starts with marriage. He marries the lovely Caroline Brown, whose family comes to Pleasant Gap from Ohio in 1867 after the war. To provide for him and his new family, he buys a farm in Deepwater, which is closer to Lewis, actually. And it's unclear if he names it or he bought it named, but the place is called Walnut Grove Stock Farm. And Clark proceeds to run a pretty successful farm that focuses on raising and selling livestock. Would you like to see a picture of Clark?
Yeah. Wow. That's not what I was expecting.
Tell me what you were expecting, like Huck Finn or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I was expecting like a little bit rougher around the edges.
Yeah.
But this is a clean cut man.
Yeah. I imagine that this picture was not taken during his farm days.
No, he's in a tweed suit.
Maybe.
It's looking tweedy.
It's tweedy.
It's tweedy. A very nice suit with a very like healthy mustache.
Yeah.
And slicked back hair. That's a good profile.
Great profile.
That's a great profile.
Yeah.
Looking very like off into the distance as if he has big dreams.
He does have big dreams. Boy, does he. But first, he focuses on farm and family for the majority of his 20s and 30s. Caroline and himself have 9 children in total.
Everybody's got to slow down.
Well, if you got a farm, you're like, we got to keep cranking them.
Keep cranking them.
I apologize for nothing.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Just like 9 is so many.
So many.
All we ever get about women
Is how many kids
kids they have.
I know. It's a tough look. It's a tough look.
Whatever. 9 kids, fine. Family.
But we know that by at least 1884, Clark starts to insert himself into local politics. And he becomes one of the chair members for the Bates County Republican Convention. And he seems as hardcore Republican as his father, Joseph, who at that time is a judge in Pleasant Gap. And then in the election of 1884, Clark runs for Circuit County Judge, and he is elected. And in 1886, he's elected again, but this time of the Southern District Court. But then in 1888, he loses the election to the Democratic nomination. But as we'll find out, Clark won't be kept down for long. So Clark becomes a judge. That's what he's doing. He does that for about 4 years until he loses to the Democratic candidate. And this kicks off a pretty hefty career in politics. But what about Lewis?
What about Lewis?
What about Lewis? Lewis also gets married, and he marries a Rachel Emma Hall in 1877 at the age of 20. She goes by Emmy. And I can't prove causation, but I think there's a correlation in the fact that Joseph Beatty, Lewis's uncle, who he grew up with, dies in the January of 1887, and Lewis marries in August of 1887. I just sort of wonder if there's like something going on there. And I say that also because Joseph wills his farm and land to his wife, Fanny. The exact words being that he wills her this land while he's alive, and then when she dies, that land will actually be donated to the county for the poor and needy. But while Fanny is alive, she does have the farm, and there are no other children but Lewis. So de facto, Lewis heads the farm. And I wonder if he gets married due to the fact that he's now the head of this farm.
Yeah.
So he has a living now, and he probably needed the help anyway. Hey, Kim, do you want to see a picture of Lewis at this time?
Absolutely, I do.
Nerd.
He is a nerd. He looks really dweeby.
Yeah.
He's got, he kind of looks like someone took Clark and smushed him into a box that he didn't fit in properly.
Do you want to say more about that?
Well, he's just he's a little bit rounder, just in general. His hair is slicked, but it's more swoopy uppy.
Yeah, sure.
There's a whole curl of a wave going on the top. And he has a beard that is just scraggly.
Scraggly, poofy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he has a monocle.
Is it just a monocle?
Oh, no, he has glasses. I'm sorry.
I think it's bifocals.
I saw wrong.
Monocle would be sick.
A monocle would be sick. He's giving monocle energy. He looks a little bit like a kooky doctor.
Yeah, I think him and Dr. Kilmer would get along fine.
100% they would. 100%. He's also looking to the side in his photo, but it's a little bit less dreamy and more just kind of happy to be here.
Just vibing.
Just happy to be here.
So he and Emmy live on the farm with Fanny, and they have 8 children together, which is 1 less than 9.
We're getting better.
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of. Still a lot of kids. I guess also well, this is grim. You're less likely to survive back then. So maybe you shoot for more and hope that you get a couple good ones.
No, 100%. Well, we Joseph had 18 kids, but what was it, 8 of them died or something?
Yeah.
Pretty intense.
Yikes.
Mm-hmm. The farming business does not seem to fulfill Lewis, though. And I suspect the time he spent with Fanny's father, Joseph Beaver, and at his church double branch had an effect on him. And I don't know exactly what prompted the change, and I don't know how it all came about, but by 1882 or 1883, Lewis becomes a reverend. And again, details are fuzzy, but the data shows that Lewis becomes something of a traveling preacher, maybe even what I might call a missionary, to a place so godless and out there, Burnett County, Texas.
Uh-oh.
Man, those heathens.
Oh, no.
And you might be thinking, Karyn, do you mean he just moved to Burnett County, Texas to become a preacher? And I think, no. Lewis and Emmy seem to travel back and forth from Missouri to Texas and back again multiple times over the next decade.
How far? I mean, how long? How far?
It is 11 hours. Isn't that crazy?
Oh my God.
It's 11 hours and 670 miles.
And that's in a car in now times.
That's in a car in now times.
How? That can't be possible.
So
that they went back and forth?
I mean, if you walk it, that is a 10-day journey. But I guess if you're in a wagon, people did do that.
Well, so we're not in automobile times, right?
No, we're not in automobile times.
So we're taking wagons.
Yeah. And even if when people did get automobiles, they weren't taking them on long road trips because they would just die.
Right.
Yeah. The cars, not the people. Maybe the people do.
Maybe the people do. Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a journey.
It's quite a journey, but he did do that.
What a specific place. Why there?
I have no idea. But I mean, over the next few years, some of his children are born in Texas and some of them are born in Missouri, which is another evidence that they were going back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like missionary behavior though, right? They go to the front lines and then they're back on furlough.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how missionaries were with like native folks back then. I sort of wonder
Yep.
if that's it, or if he was trying to like found a church, something. As far as I can tell, though, Lewis does keep working on his aunt's farm as well, and he manages the business of all of that, all during the time that he's traveling back and forth to Texas, and he's doing sermons and baptizing while he's in town, both places.
Wow.
So while Clark is building a pretty illustrious career in politics, Lewis is becoming known for his saving of souls.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get back to Clark. By the late 1880s and the 1890s, politics in the U.S., but maybe most especially in Missouri, are heated. The elections between the Republican and Democrat candidates become wild spectacles of mudslinging. And if the newspaper coverage of them are any indication, that bipartisan decorum that we're always lamenting the loss of in the modern day didn't seem to really exist at that time either.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the parallels between the late 19th century American politics and our present day politics kind of kept smacking me in the face at every turn in this story. But to understand all that, we will need to do some responsible contextualizing by doing a super fun and super interesting and not at all dry overview of American politics from the American Revolution to post-Civil War Reconstruction. Are you ready, Kim? So the founding fathers were actually pretty opposed to political parties at the beginning of the nation.
I know this from Hamilton.
I'm so proud of you. I think the idea was that political parties would breed discord, which, like, what visionaries? But that ideal, which was founded during a time when only about 15 to 25% of the American population was eligible to vote, that broke down pretty quickly as the new country grew. It was in George Washington's second term that two political parties began to form. 100 points if you can name just one of them, Kim.
A Democratic Republican.
Oh, she's good.
And then a Federalist.
Yeah!
Hamilton, baby.
You're so smart.
Literally just Hamilton.
I wouldn't have gotten this because I haven't watched Hamilton. So when I was writing this, I didn't know it.
We need to, maybe on our Patreon, we should do a live watch
Of Hamilton. I would like that.
Okay, great.
It was the Federalist and the Democratic Republican.
Uh-huh.
And although the policy differences, I'm sure, were very nuanced, I think a lot of their disagreement can be boiled down to what each side felt about the U.S. National Bank.
Hamilton.
You already know all this.
It's Hamilton.
Well, then this is just for the viewers.
This is great, though, because now I'm like imagining.
You feel like you're in it now.
Yeah, it's perfect.
The Federalists were pro-government bank, and the Democratic Republicans were anti-government anything. Basically, this was the origin of our big government, small government argument, which still reigns supreme today. I'm going to skip ahead.
Does it even, though?
I mean, the framing still exists.
The framing,
But it's not, it's so convoluted.
Yeah.
Whatever, we don't need to get it. I'm going to skip ahead a little.
Okay.
But basically, the Federalists fade away. And in the 1820s, there's a rift that starts to show amongst the Democratic Republican Party. And what it was over, you might be wondering. Yep, that's right. Banks. So
Cool.
It's all about banks.
It's all about
this was
banks.
new to me, was that like the government bank was actually like formed U.S. politics deeply for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Now I know.
That's like from the jump.
From the jump.
From the jump.
Money.
Who knew?
I went down a Wikipedia rabbit hole on all of that. I'm telling you, I probably spent hours upon hours. I could write a book now about 18th century or like 18th, 19th century politics. I tried my hardest to distill it. Yeah. But it was so interesting.
Nerd.
It was really interesting. But all I'll say here is that before 1819, banks in America were out here behaving however they wanted with their credit. And when crops did horribly and cotton prices tanked, there ended up being a financial disaster in 1819. Kind of a 2008 situation, you know what I mean? My grip on the understanding of economics is tenuous at best.
Yeah.
So please, nobody ask me follow-up questions. That includes you.
Okay, great.
But the financial crisis was in no small part due to investment practices by the U.S. Bank. Yes, that's right. There was a United States Bank at this time. And the U.S. Bank invested all of those frontiersmen, like Joseph Wix, invested in them and Southern cotton farmers. And when the crops failed, it hit the farmers pretty hard, most especially Southern farmers who were now in crippling debt. This ire toward their debt translated in no small part to ire with the federal government. And this voting demographic began to yearn for a more limited federal government. Now it's time to welcome back to the pod our BFF, Andrew Jackson.
Oh,
I know.
man.
It always comes back to Andrew Jackson. He's now this national military hero, and he becomes a sort of face for the burgeoning political party, the Democrats, which is breaking off of the Democratic Republicans. And in the election of 1828, there was this huge political campaign organized by the Democratic political party. And it showed an enthusiasm for a national election that had never been seen before this. And it paved the way for the future of American political theater. But Jackson came in so hard on the bank issue in his presidency, and he used his authority as the president to attack the government institution that was the Bank of the United States.
Whoa.
He called the Bank of the United States corrupt and unconstitutional, and he tried to flex independent power outside of the other branches of government, which hadn't really been done before or after. Just kidding. It's being done now. And this is what some might call an overreach. And it sowed the seeds for an opposing party to emerge because Jacksonian Democrats had basically eclipsed the earlier Democratic Republican Party. So there was like this vacuum of space for opposition. In comes the Whigs. They were pro-bank, pro-government. But with slavery becoming the issue du jour of the mid-19th century, they were becoming pro-abolition. While the Jacksonian Democrats were the party of states' rights because they were the Southern Democrats with all the debt. In 1854, the Republican Party was founded by a group of Whigs who wanted to be on the anti-slavery platform.
Why Whigs?
It was a British term.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That's as much as I know.
Whigs and Tories, is that a thing?
That's something.
That's something from somewhere.
In 1854, the Republican Party is now founded by a group of those same Whigs who wanted to be on an anti-slavery platform. And this is the party of Abraham Lincoln, who famously won the presidency.
Yeah.
So now, by the time the Civil War rolls around, we have this two-party system of the United States, the Democrats and the Republicans. And they do not even remotely look like the Democrats and Republicans of our modern America, which we talked a little bit last episode about that. The Democrats of the mid-19th century are the party of small government, states' rights, and slavery, while the Republicans are the party of utilizing federal legislation and resources nationally. So in the years leading up to the Civil War, this translated mainly to pro-slavery versus anti-slavery. And while there were Northern Democrats who believed slavery should be legislated locally, by the Civil War, those Northern Democrats were not common. They were being
Reformed?
maybe reformed.
Okay.
So when the Civil War is finished and the South is lost, Republicans become the dominating political party because why would the nation back the losing horse? Know what I mean? Republicans.
So sorry, I had a tickle in my throat.
Republicans, mainly the Northerners, were not massively impacted by the war economically and had the capital to move the party forward and move the country forward. So they were known for modernizing and progressing America. So, you know, the Progressive Party.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Democrats clung to conservative values and were generally focused on an agrarian forward or anti-big business policies. So post-Civil War, these two parties were polarized to the gods. They could not be more diametrically opposed. If you remember our last episode, we talked about how Missouri was this microcosm of the national stage of politics, where during the war there was such heated guerrilla fighting that the federal government kicked everyone out. So this polarized political opinions stayed around until after the war. So when everyone returned, they were even more contentious because now they had literal war trauma and they had committed this against each other for years. And now they have all these opposing ideologies. This contention between Union and rebel post-war resulted in the Joseph Wix shooting and killing of ex-rebel Charles Hartman,
Yes.
which he stood trial. But if you haven't listened to the last episode, looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
I also mentioned last episode that in Missouri, as well as other states, but maybe most especially Missouri, there was a faction of Republicans known as the Radicals, and their stance was very punitive forward to anyone who had even a whiff of rebel connection. They also leaned pretty far forward on black suffrage, suggesting that freed black enslaved people be given all of the same rights as white people immediately, as opposed to the mainstream Republicans who wanted to reimburse enslavers and then leave it alone. Well, in 1865, the radicals swept the Missouri elections, and after the Missouri government fully emancipated enslaved people, the radicals wanted to punish the secessionists next, as well as give full rights to black folks. But because these were such progressive ideas, there was a lot of infighting. And while Missouri Congress was debating if rebels should be punished, the rest of the state saw a resurgence of violence from bushwhackers and secessionists. So this is the time period where Joseph Wix shot Charles. Something else I found that was kind of crazy during this time is that in 1867, there was a women's suffrage association founded in Missouri, and it was the first one in the United States.
Cool.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Missouri was on the cutting edge
Missouri
of
is
progressive politics.
Hot and happening.
And just in Bates County alone, over the next decade, politics and voting became a very dangerous game. There were underhanded tactics of bribing, falsifying results. There were instances of people being threatened with violence if they turned up at the voting booth. Like literal guns and clubs and so forth were sometimes brought to the polls to prevent them from voting. And it was actually mostly radicals, though, threatening the Democrats. And of course, ex-Confederates couldn't vote at all in Missouri if they didn't do that like ironclad oath that they were like, we reject everything.
Yeah.
But during this time, new newspapers also started to pop up representing the Democrats or the Republicans. So partisan and competing newspapers were nothing new in the U.S., but on the frontier, there hadn't really been competing newspapers, or there hadn't been like a lot of newspapers on the frontier. So when cheap, accessible newspapers become more common, partisan newspapers become numerous. And a fun fact I learned while researching this, partisan media was actually the common way of doing journalism up until around the 1960s. So apparently everyone just knew that newspapers reflected the opinion of the editor, and that was fine. It wasn't until the 1920s that media ethics and journalism as a profession started to move the norm towards nonpartisan reporting. Otherwise, people were just like, oh yeah, that guy who runs the newspaper feels this way and it's in my newspaper.
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting.
And now Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post.
So now we're back to it, huh?
And we're back to it.
We're back to it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, to be fair, I think the like getting rid of the pretense that newspapers don't even a little bit skew towards the opinion of the authors and the editors, I think could be helpful for media literacy in that like before it was so obvious, you just believed it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like even NPR and Associated Press, like it's the writer has opinions. They're human.
Everybody's got bias.
Everyone's got bias. And I think just being like, that's what's happening.
But then you start to get into like if you want to find the most like fair news or like the understanding of news that suits your needs.
Oh, the echo chamber.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we start looking at like the human beings doing the writing. I don't know. I think like I get it, but also.
Yeah, we're not going to solve it. But I think that trying to move away from like this idea of like there is some kind of like perfect norm of nonpartisan reporting that exists. I think there's a possibility it could be useful. I'm not an expert.
Back then, when there was like strictly and like understood partisan reporting, do you think it was as extreme as what we see now with like Fox News?
Sometimes worse.
Okay.
I read a lot of these newspapers.
Oh God.
I mean, you remember, and this had nothing to do with, well, it did have something to do with politics. You remember reading the newspaper from last time where they were like, so-and-so opens his bunghole and like,
oh my God, so good.
And like lies pour out.
So good.
And that was partisan reporting because that was the Democratic newspaper reporting about a Republican witness.
Yeah. But that was like, was that a proper article or was that like an op-ed?
That was a proper article. And I think that's like the point I'm trying to get across here is like, the newspaper was just writing stories. There wasn't like, this is opinion, this is a story.
Right.
The people were just writing and it was the editor's views up until the 1960s where people started saying like, this is an opinion piece.
Yeah.
Or like this newspaper is doing nonpartisan reporting.
Right. Okay.
And that's one of those things about this story that I really kept coming back to was like the mudslinging in these newspapers. It was volatile.
Yeah.
It was as volatile as we see right now towards politicians,
Yeah. So many more resources now to see the truth from different sources.
Yes. So with more newspapers reporting partisan ideas, opinions, and so forth, that volatility between political parties would get exacerbated. And when a Democrat got elected governor in Missouri in 1870, ex-Confederates got the right to vote again. And while the violence generally subsided by the time Clark Wix joins Missouri politics in the mid-1880s, the political landscape is still vehemently polarized. That brings us to 1894. And the Bates County Republican Party nominates Clark Wix for state legislator. It's a pretty big step up from Clark, who's just the circuit county judge. This guy was looking to represent Bates County in St. Louis and make laws and the whatnot, yada, yada. Clark and his wife, Caroline, actually spent the year before this election traveling to California, spending the winter in Orange County for Caroline's health. I don't know what she was suffering from, but they came back in 1894. She was all better, and then Clark was nominated for state legislature.
Yes. Yeah.
And this race, like the 1888 race, ended up being pretty tight and fraught with mudslinging and big opinions. There were accusations that Clark was throwing his fellow Republican candidates on the ticket under the bus in order to secure more votes and like positive opinions for himself. There were no more details than that. There was just like an allusion to something that was happening. So I don't totally know what he might have been selling them out for or how it benefited him, or even if it's true at all. Clark was also accused of trying to obtain financial and or tax records on an opponent.
Ooh.
What he was looking for, we don't know. But this accusation, I think, is probably true because there were witnesses who attested to him going to the county clerk in person and asking for the tax records.
Wow.
Yeah. And as a little political history side note in this campaign, starting in the 1870s, there was this grassroots movement that started taking hold called the populist movement.
Mm-hmm.
And this movement up to the 1890s was primarily more of like a national alliance than a political party. The populist movement at its core grew out of the working class, specifically farmers, and their desire to see big business get their interests out of politics. Mm-hmm. This was a uniting movement. It meant that the party took from both the Democrat and Republican ideas, and they took from both of their voting bases. So by the 1890s, they started running their own candidates because they believed neither the Democrats nor the Republicans had the interests of the working class. And populism did fairly well on the ballot for a minute in the 1890s, but it definitely split up the white vote. And interestingly, it was because of this populist movement that the black voter base finally became a scale-tipping political power in the U.S. Because with a split-up white base, whichever party got the black vote would pull ahead. So candidates actually started wooing black voters during this time.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And in the mid-1890s, the Populist Party seemed to have more support from a traditionally Republican base. And I think that shows up in the Bates County result because the Democrats come out on top on most of the races, including Clark's race. But the populist and Republican movements or parties were much lower. And I think that's because the populist candidates were taking away from the Republican base. The Democrats went ahead.
Isn't that what people were saying about Jill Stein?
100%. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Third party voting, tough.
Yeah, tough.
And as a side note, populism fizzled out by the turn of the century because the two bigger parties started learning how to game their strategies and take their voting base back, rendering the populism party useless. But their ideas still live on, and you can see their legacy in the reform wings of both Republican and Democratic parties. With these losses, seems like Clark wasn't trying to run in 1898, even though the Republican committee tried to nominate him again for county recorder. Clark said, no, thank you. So he did take the nomination for the chairman of the Republican committee in 1898. So during the campaign, that means he still had political sway, but he wasn't a nominee. That being said, Clark couldn't stay away for long. And 1902 rolls around, and Clark throws his hat back in the ring. And this time, when the committee nominates him to run for county recorder, he does it. And it's the 1902 race that has lasting consequence for the Wix family. Between Clark running for office in 1894 and him running again in 1902, something very important happens. The Wix patriarch, Joseph, passes away in 1895. And as far as I can tell, Lewis Wix comes back to be with family, like on a permanent basis from Texas to help administer the will. So he sticks around. And for the time being, there doesn't seem to be anything amiss in the family from the outsider's perspective, or maybe I should say from a record's perspective. In fact, in 1898, there's like a short newspaper clipping that says Lewis Clark, that says Lewis was visiting Clark and his wife when he fell ill and he had to stay at the house, and Clark and his wife took care of him. So at least by that time, it seems like everything's copacetic. But there is something a little bit hinky that happens in January 1899, which is the Wixes get messy, or Lewis gets messy.
Oh,
he's a messy boy.
Oh, Louis. Is it L-E-W?
Lewis.
Wow.
The Bates County Democrat, the main Democratic newspaper of the county, runs their own short clipping in 1899 that states very simply that Lewis Wix has ordered that the Democrat be delivered to his house. And I have no way of knowing if Lewis wanted them to announce his subscription, but this is something I've seen before.
Oh, I see. For a second, my brain thought you were talking about like a person who is a Democrat.
Yeah, to
needing
like
to be delivered.
A mail-ordered Democrat.
I don't know why. Okay, that makes way more sense. But also, ooh, scandal.
Yeah, I've seen this happen before in other newspapers where newspapers, especially in like the small towns, would want to let others know that like the esteemed citizens of the area are getting their news from them.
Right.
So I guess it wouldn't be that crazy. I don't know how much of that, though, is like wanted by the people subscribing for them to like share their business like that.
I don't know.
But it's a big statement to put out into the universe. The Wixes were staunchly Republican. We know this. And they voted Republican. They ran Republican. And the Bates County Democrat had already proven to be a publication that raked the Wixes over the coals at every turn. So it seems like a strange move to support them like this. Then 1902 rolls around and Clark is having a very good campaign by all accounts.
Uh-oh.
But by the time October rolls around, he's been kissing babies the whole nine to great aplomb.
Sure.
But something else happens that's not only hinky, it's downright bombastic. In the early days of October 1902, Lewis Wix takes himself to the city of Butler in Bates County and pays a visit to the Bates County Democrat. It's a social visit, I guess. And while he's there, he has a pretty public conversation about the upcoming campaign where he declares loudly that he will be voting Democrat all the way down the ticket. This news spreads like wildfire. And the man known as Elder Lewis Wix, man of God and successful local farmer, has declared that not only will he not be voting Republican this election, but he will not even be voting for his own brother.
Ooh.
The quote in the newspaper is that Lewis couldn't conscientiously vote for his brother.
Wow.
Spicy.
Oh, spicy. What does that mean?
Oh, it gets deep.
Okay, go.
So the Republican newspaper took the news of losing Lewis's vote with dignity. Sorry, did I say dignity? I must have mispronounced dripping sarcasm and disdain.
Oh, here we go.
Kim.
I love when the newspaper gets involved.
Would you read the following excerpt?
Yeah. There is evidence that the good news reached the Democrat office a few days later, where it was received with great rejoicing. What a manifestation of brotherly love and Christian charity from a minister of the gospel. It is now in order for the Republicans of Bates County to put on sackcloth and mourning and go out of business. Let us weep. Oh my God.
I love that they're basically like, big loss, whoop-de-doo.
That's like the equivalent of Crimea River.
Yeah.
That's so good.
So funny.
Oh man.
I love old newspapers.
Yeah, me too.
They're so
Let us
funny.
weep is like, that's a stinger. That's so good.
In that same article, the newspaper makes an implication that Lewis had been seen at an attorney's office right before he visited the newspaper. There's no other explanation than that, though the way that the article phrases it, it's clearly meant to accuse him of something.
Yeah.
I don't know what, just like, oh, he visited the attorney's office and then he went to the newspaper. Don't know what that means.
Huh.
And so much of the details of the story seem to happen outside of the newspapers, and obviously we're without those details. I don't have them. So we have to piece together a million inferences made by these newspapers after the real life incidents occurred. And I think the one you just read is very indicative of how they talk, of where they're like, they don't say the thing exactly. Like, there was much rejoicing. What was the rejoicing for who? For what? What's the subject? What's the object? What's the verb?
Yeah.
Apparently you have to be from the town and understand the inside jokes to know most of these. Yeah.
Oh, man.
For example, the Republican press implies that Lewis makes some kind of slanderous accusation against Clark, and it might have something to do with money because the press publishes a letter by an ex-farmhand of Clark's who lauds Clark's character by saying that he always paid him on time, he's a good Christian man, et cetera, but ends the letter by saying that he was once a member of Lewis's church, but finds it strange that all of Lewis's preaching is done away from home. So he slams him for being an away preacher.
An away preacher.
But I think like the point of the letter about Clark's character was like, he pays me on time. He's so good with money.
Yeah.
So I think there was some accusation made about money that I don't understand. I have some theories. We'll come to those later.
Okay.
Also, that same article says that Clark has always conducted himself in, quote, a manly way. And that was their way of just like, he's a good dude. He conducts himself manly.
Yeah, he's a bro.
He's a bro. That article defending Clark and basically saying that Lewis is unreliable was signed by 14 of Clark's neighbors.
Whoa.
But the fact that the press published such an article was met with resistance in the community at large as like the wrong way to do politics.
Yeah.
To like coerce community members into like signing something about your character. But that's not the end of it, Kim. A few days after this article, the Bates County Democrat publishes an article that says, hey, we didn't want to do this, but you forced our hand, and proceeds to claim that just before Lewis pledged his support to the Democrats, he had received a letter from Clark saying, and I quote, I won't do anything, but my friends will see to you. Remember what happened to poor Frank Chambers for opposing me. What?
Oh, is that a threat?
Is that a threat?
Bada bing.
We're getting Real Housewives now.
We really are.
I know what you're thinking, Kim. Who the heck is Frank Chambers?
Who the heck is Frank?
Well, Frank was a lifelong Republican who ran for clerk in 1898, but lost. So a couple of years later, he started his own Republican newspaper, different than the Republican press. And that seemed to ruffle some feathers because it seemed like he was taking customers from the press. Details are thin on the ground, but at the end of 1901, Frank is writing some think pieces about how bad the divisions are in the Republican Party of Bates County. And he seems to allude to something that I saw alluded to in other newspapers, which is that there is this like brotherhood of Republicans who always get on the ticket, and suspicion is thrown that these guys aren't getting on there fairly, like by being nominated in primaries. They're just like this fraternity of guys who keep putting each other on the ballot. And Clark is never mentioned specifically, but the inference is there like pretty hard. So early in 1902, Frank has to sell his newspaper to the editor of a different newspaper due to money problems. And he gets out of the newspaper biz entirely. He goes into the hog business, actually. And we hear no more of him until he's brought up in this letter from Clark. And then the Democrat makes a sassy remark about how the Republican press is falling nicely into line because they don't want to go the way of Frank Chambers.
Woo!
So I think
Poor Frank.
I think Frank was trying to do nonpartisan Republican reporting.
Yeah.
And Clark must have done something to run him out of business. I think that's crazy.
That's a little sneaky.
I know. Kim, do you want to read some more excerpts?
Yeah, of course
from
I do.
Clark's letters to Lewis Wix. Alleged letters. Alleged.
Quote, I don't want you to vote for me unless you can do it with a clear conscience, but I want to see you for your own good. But my dear brother, you are mistaken in the man you are fooling with. If you think I won't resent your talk to a finish and expose you to public view, I will have more help than you are aware of. I have letters that I will use in explanation in your case if you drive me to it. My friends are ready to resent any and all things that you may say about me, and they say things that I cannot and will not have said about a brother if I can help it. You You seen how poor Frank Chambers went, and I never said a word against him.
That is a lot. It's scathing.
Scathing.
Politicians, am I
My
right?
dear brother, you are mistaken.
I know.
Let us weep.
It's so dramatic.
I'm
so alone.
It's actually not as dramatic as I was hoping for.
Yeah. I mean, he's a politician. He can't outright say he said my friends.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. Like for a politician, this is nutso.
Right, like my friends will see to you?
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Excuse me?
Anyway. Later after this, the Bates County Democrat, publishes a short letter signed by 120 citizens that Lewis is the most Christian gentleman in the whole world and he's perfect in every way.
Don't buy it. I don't buy it. Mm-mm.
To which Clark writes his own letter and publishes this letter and it says like from Clark Wix at the end. It says basically he's run a good campaign on his own merits and he wouldn't dare drag his brother through the mud the way that he has dragged him. Even though he absolutely could, because he's received so many harsh words about Lewis from not just Butler, but from Texas.
Oh.
And that doesn't matter though, because he would never reveal like dirty family business. So the letter was basically like, I'm running on my own merits. I would never resort to dirty tactics, even though I could, and I have all the ammo.
That's giving Jax Taylor.
I love it.
A little bit.
It is.
I want to know where this came from. And also when you say like, when it's going back and forth ping-ponging like this over like what time span?
In October and the election's November. So just
it's
1 month.
So
really.
it's literally just like week by week by week.
Yeah. Day by day sometimes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I love
so
it.
These newspapers, I think were like every couple days, I think. Maybe all the time, but probably especially during the election. So this leads to another rumor that the estate of Joseph Wix was not fairly settled.
Ooh.
But 7 of the Wix children come together and publish a letter saying that this is a malicious rumor and they feel that it was well and truly settled. So, I mean, more Wix children than not say it's fairly settled. But let's remember, Lewis, I'm pretty sure he's the only one, was sent away in his youth to live with an aunt and uncle. He wasn't there.
Right.
So I could see this becoming one of those things where Lewis isn't included as fairly because he wasn't with the rest of the siblings.
Yeah.
Which is yikes.
Or he was included fairly and they're bitter about it because they're like, well, we don't even know this guy.
Yeah, totally could be. I would guess that he was included fairly because of the attorney comment. Like he saw the attorney and then he went to go vote.
Right.
Or say that he's voting against his brother. So the attorney could have been like, hey, got some tough news, bud.
Yeah.
And my other thought process on this is the accusation that Clark is like, it deals unfairly with money. That is like the subtext of all of these, that like the issue is something to do with money. Anyway, the day of election comes and Clark loses.
Ooh.
By 59 votes to the Democratic candidate. And as one voter put it, quote, Clark Wix was defeated by 40 votes. It's enough to make a preacher swear.
Wait, how many votes were there total?
Just under 2,000 for the top 2 candidates.
Oh, okay.
And then there was like a third candidate with like a few hundred.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So 59 is like substantial.
It's still like, that's a tight margin. What little I can glean after this disastrous campaign is that there's some legal case between Clark and Lewis that has to do with the sale of something, but I don't know what. But then in December 1902, just a month after the election, Clark actually sells his house to someone else and moves his family to Kansas City, where he accepts a job with the IRS, our Internal Revenue Service, and he'll be the Internal Revenue Collector for Joplin County. And honestly, I can't blame him for wanting to get out of Bates County and into a stable government job because at this point, he hasn't won an election since, what was it, like 1886, I think.
So it's been a minute.
It's been a minute. So it's actually been a like failed political career, I would say. Poor Clark. But the years pass and both brothers live their lives separately. A few interesting things do happen. For Lewis, over the years, he gets into a couple farming accidents. He is assaulted by 3 men one night in his home. That gets kind of brushed over.
Oh, that feels like
Well, I mean, no reason was given, but I think we would have heard if it had to do with
If it was
this.
Clark related?
Yeah, I don't think it
okay.
was.
Okay.
And then for Clark, after about 5 years, he does go back to Butler and he runs for postmaster in 1906. And this time he gets elected.
He's back.
He's back
He's
and
back,
he's
baby.
postmaster. And then in 1908, actually in Kansas City, but Clark is not there at the time, one of Clark and Lewis's nephews, also named Clark Wix, was charged with murdering a man and stealing his watch and some diamond jewelry, which also brought to light suspicions for a murder of an old man years prior, with the suspicion of it being this younger Clark Wix.
Whoa.
The elder Clark Wix was in full support of his nephew during this time, while the younger Clark is pleading innocent. And within a month, the young Wix actually was let out on bond while he waits for trial. And the elder Clark was one of the signers of the bond.
Suspicious.
Later, the indictment was fully rejected by a grand jury. It never went to trial and he never got convicted for anything.
Wasn't Joseph Wix with his nephew when he was in the shootout?
Yes, but this is one of Clark and Lewis's nephews.
Yeah. I'm just, the parallels
Oh, yes.
are very interesting.
Thus.
Nephew crimes.
Nephew crimes. And then a year later, the younger Clark Wix was arrested again for assaulting a different person.
Ay.
And then in 1910, he dies of typhoid.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
What a way to go.
What a bright star. That just kind of has a weird end.
Yikes. Shoo-wee.
I know. Well, that murder trial alone could probably be another episode. I didn't want to get too in the weeds on it, but it's a very interesting murder trial.
I think we should do it.
Yeah, we can do it. There's
Okay.
like tons of newspapers that like quote all the witnesses that come to trial and stuff. It's very interesting.
I have so much like suspicion of men defending their like sons and nephews.
Oh yeah, it feels, especially back then,
Yeah.
there was this feeling of like like it was totally ethically okay as long as you had the right powerful people in your corner, especially if, like protect family at all costs kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And it's
It is
not
also, it
great.
makes me think of the one episode from My Family from like earlier on in the season with the Irish guy.
Oh yeah.
And
Because he had like no one.
he had no one. And the guy who he shot,
Oh, the guy who shot
his dad wrote the thing in the paper being
Yeah.
like, my son is a stand-up gentleman, but like, I don't trust that.
Oh.
I don't trust it.
You shouldn't. This one especially.
I know, suspicious.
This one especially smelled bad.
Yeah. Well, and he's arrested for assault.
Like,
And
yeah,
Lewis is
there's
assaulted.
pattern of behavior.
There's a pattern of behavior.
Thank you.
Sus.
Now, while this case is on pause in 1908, 1 month later, the elder Clark actually gets into some court trouble.
Oh my God.
It gets brought to the court that he is accused of, quote, pernicious political activity in the campaign for Butler postmaster in 1906. And it was actually high-level Republicans in Butler that brought the charges. Apparently, and this is a bit of conjecture on the part of the newspapers, but the conjecture is that Wix was openly opposed to the nomination of a Bates County nominee to Congress. And the accusation is that the machine of the Republican Party in Bates was holding their thumb on Wix to kind of shut him up and be like, this is our candidate, stop getting involved. So the pernicious activity actually kind of meant that Clark was unduly active in a political campaign that wasn't his own as someone who's holding political office, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's crazy though, because people do that all the time now.
Yes, they do. So as someone who has been part of that machine for so long, I found it a little surprising that Clark was on the outs.
Yeah.
And apparently the charges also included some accusations that Clark was just bad at his job and the postmaster's office was unorganized and inefficient and they wanted him out.
And how old is he at this point?
Oh, good question. So he was born in 1850. It is now 1908 when he's accused. He's 58. Thank you. Wix went all the way to Washington, D.C. Like he traveled to Washington, D.C. to defend himself against these charges. But in the end, he didn't lose his post, and Washington stated that he could continue to serve as postmaster, but he could not be reappointed. So this accusation followed him for a while, with opponents attempting to continue to take the office of postmaster from him over the next year or so. Still, his term was up in 1910, and he did leave his position. And over the next few years, shots get fired at Clark, dredging up some of the accusations from 1906. But generally, Clark just lives his life in Butler. He travels to California occasionally for his wife's health again, and then back. And then in 1918, so now we're quite a few years, something wild happens. Our boy Clark gets nominated by the Republican Senatorial Convention to be the Republican nominee for state senator for their district.
What?
And surprise of all surprises, he wins.
What?
By about 100 votes, he wins.
It makes me think that he's like doing some puppetry.
I mean, that's 10 years from all these accusations.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's doing something.
Yeah. But also the accusations came out like well after all of his nonsense or while he was doing nonsense.
Wait, what?
The accusations that come out after he leaves his post, master.
Oh, yes. They come out after he's done the nonsense.
Okay.
Yeah. I think.
So like, why are we going after him in the downtime?
I think they just...
What else is he doing that calls for people to come after him?
Yeah, I'm sure he was still very involved in like the campaigns of the area. I mean, at that point, he's been on the Republican? He's been on the Republican like committee in the area. So I'm sure, he's still like very involved during this time. Anyway, he's elected state senator.
Wow.
Unfortunately, Clark was only state senator for about 6 months before he passed away of stomach cancer.
Oh,
I
man.
know. You know what I find so crazy is he ran for office and was like in politics most of his adult life, but was actually like very rarely an elected official.
Yeah.
And then he finally gets the big one.
The biggest one.
6 months and he misses it.
Tough.
That's crazy.
That's tough. Wasn't meant to be.
Wasn't meant to be.
Mm-mm.
His funeral was massive, and senators and representatives and like Butler Friends and every newspaper you can think of, were there. They wrote long obituaries for him, including the Democrat, who wrote that he was a good man and a most excellent citizen.
Oh my God.
I
flip-flop.
Love it.
That's so funny.
They're like, he's dead now. Decorum.
Yeah.
Decorum.
That's crazy.
And Lewis, in 1910, he actually contemplated running for judge in Butler, but and that was like right around the time that Clark was still receiving heat for his postmaster position, because that's the year he was supposed to get out of it. But there's actually no evidence whatsoever that Lewis actually tried to run. I imagine he might have just been like, I'm going to do it too.
Yeah.
I'm going to be judge.
For some reason, even though Clark is like kind of getting slammed by other people, I feel like Lewis is still shady. Like maybe he's doing the same kind of shady stuff, but not as well.
Oh, yeah. Remember at the beginning when I was like, you can't say like one person's good, one person's bad. We're rooting for one and not the other. It's like watching Vanderpump. There's no person to actually root for.
No, never.
Anyway, so Lewis spends his day at his farm in Deepwater, close to his adopted mother and aunt, Fanny. He does remain a staunch Democrat since his switch up in the late 1890s, and he remains that till he dies. And then when Fanny dies in 1914, she wills her land to him, which, if you remember...
Wait, to Lewis or to Clark?
To Lewis.
To Lewis. Okay.
Do you remember back in the day when Fanny's husband died, he said she gets the land until she dies, and then it goes to the county to make a home for the poor and needy. But in the end, she willed it to Lewis and he got the land. So screw you, the poor and needy.
Maybe Lewis was like, trust me, I'll handle it. I'll do good church for the poor and needy on this land.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I don't know why, but Lewis moves to Arizona. And in the 1920 census, it says that he's a farmer there at the age of 62. And then 3 years later, he passes away. So I have no idea why he went to Arizona those last years of his life. If I had done a deeper dive into all of his children, maybe I would find that someone was there. I didn't do like a huge deep dive on his children. So
I wonder if one of the children who was born in Texas, I don't know, if there's like a Texas connection.
Oh, maybe.
Because Texas and, well, I guess.
Let's look it up. It'd probably be
it's
like
actually not that close.
16
It's
hours.
so far. I know in my mind it was like everything down there is kind of the same. There's a whole state in between Texas and Arizona.
Anyway, Kim, that's our story.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But let's talk resonance, Kim. We definitely touched on the through line of the political landscape in America over the years to the modern day. And we did that in the last episode as well. And it felt like we were touching on some pretty heavy and important themes. But I kind of think that the through line in this episode to the modern day could be a little more lighthearted. There's this idea, I think, that politicians and pundits, like they try to peddle right now, that there was this like better previous time in politics where everyone was civil and they all respected each other, and despite their politics, there was no name calling or underhandedness. And I mean, it's similar to every other narrative about the past being like a simple and pleasant time as opposed to now, the evil modern day. But to those of us who study the past with more than just like a passing glance, I can't think of a more asinine take than like things were just more civil and respectable back then. Because they weren't. We know this. Things were messy and crazy just as much then as they are now. And the mudslinging, just in this one American county alone, was enough to clutch pearls. Partisan media has been inflating scandal and defaming opposition for decades, centuries even. And I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's comforting to know that we do the same horrible stuff over and over, but I do take some solace in the fact that these are not new horrors that we inflict on each other, and not just political opponent to political opponent, but like family member to family member. Like politics split the Wix family up. And while I don't align with the politics of the Democrats at the turn of the century, looking at you, Jim Crow laws, I do understand what Lewis Wix might have been feeling by openly declaring that he could not in good conscience vote Republican, even if that meant voting against his own brother. And I don't have like some grand closing thought about that, actually. It's just nice to know that like we're not the first ones to struggle in a polarized political climate. We share in that strife with previous generations, and I take some solidarity from that, I guess. I know that's not like a grand resonance, but
I have a similar one, but I'm going in the other direction with it, where I'm just feeling so frustrated by like the lack of cooperation from people in power. Like when the country was founded, like there weren't really that many dudes who signed the Declaration of Independence, right? But like they all had their own interests, and they were so selfish about them that they were only thinking about like protecting their own interests.
yeah.
Which makes sense because they're, on stolen land and declaring a brand new country on a country that already existed. But I just like, it all feels like it's like were we just always so scared of losing things? Like, is this all that this is? It's just like fear of losing what we have. Like it's power, it's money, it's resources, it's control. And like,
I think that goes way back.
I know,
Yeah.
but it's just like, it's all the same. It's all the same, and it's all been, and like, what if we all just cooperated?
Yeah, what if we all
I
cooperated?
don't know. I just
Yeah.
like, I've been thinking about socialism, but just like the scarcity mindset. And I feel like that is what was happening with politics at the very, very jump
Yes.
for this country. I think less so when we get into like the brother fighting.
Yeah.
But there's still just this sense of like, why does it have to be so opposed? Like, why can't we compromise? Isn't it possible? It's got to be possible somewhere.
Kim, I have one last, it's a resonance prompt that I might want you to talk about.
Okay.
If you're comfortable talking about it.
Sure.
But I would be remiss not to ask you about how this connection to politics as a family feels and how it's trickled down the generations to you. Because I actually saw a lot about your great-grandmother, Cora, in kind of the margins of this story, because I would read an article about Postmaster Clark and his political struggles, and then like on the same page, there would actually be like a little snippet about Cora Wix seen attending a social event in Butler or like winning a prize at the county fair.
Oh, that's cool.
It's very cute.
Yeah.
The county fair contest was guessing how many like kernels of grain or something were like fed to chickens. I don't know. It was some like county. It was cute. she was very much a part of Butler
Yeah.
during this time. So she
Cool.
would have like seen it and heard all of it.
Mhm.
And I am just curious about how this your second great granduncle was a state senator for 6
Yeah.
months. There's obviously a connection in your family that has trickled down. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that has resonated with you in any way.
I think that my family, well, especially this side of the family, like one of the calling cards of this side of the family is just like charm and like excellent communication. That's not just like being able to schmooze people. It's like a genuine interest in how other people communicate to each other and
Yeah.
how they relate to the world. Like my grandmother, I think, was very interested in her kids' thoughts and feelings. My grandfather had like really interesting things to say about all of us and like our
Yeah.
dynamics and stuff. And my grandfather was a politician.
He was a politician.
Yeah. Well, I
Mhm.
was like attorney general, but like also a
He
politician.
ran for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
So yeah, this idea of like people in that family being extremely like, it's not like men of the people, but just like eager to represent is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
I don't relate to it.
You love being a number 2.
But like my dad, who's not related, but still my dad would be like an excellent like mayor.
Yeah.
Or like city council person. And my mom too, although she cares less for it. But I don't know. There's just like it's kind of fun to think about like just a history of people being like interested in, I don't know, representing people.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. And not just that, there's also like a law component too, right? Because your
Yeah.
grandfather was attorney general. And was he attorney general or Commonwealth's attorney?
Commonwealth attorney of Virginia.
Oh, yeah. We should
Yeah.
probably fix that.
Mhm.
Or I guess we could just say, hey, we're fixing it now.
Yeah,
Her
yeah.
grandfather was a Commonwealth's attorney.
Yeah. Mhm.
But I mean, that's still like there's a law connection here,
Mhm.
right? Like Joseph Wix, he was postmaster and then he was judge, and he was judge for a
Right.
very long time.
Right.
Clark was judge for a certain
Yeah.
amount of time. And yeah, I think there's a little bit of a law connection here that I find interesting.
It is very interesting. It does make me wonder, like, do we have a propensity? Is that the
Propensity.
word?
Yeah.
Towards justice
Yeah.
or
Interesting.
control?
Porque no los dos.
But yeah, I don't know. It's real. I kind of want to talk to my mom about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like, I mean, it kind of skips a generation or two.
Well, I mean, Cora is
Yeah.
a woman.
Right.
And she's the generation that has skipped.
Right.
I think
Mhm.
that's not very surprising.
Yeah.
But her child goes to DC, I believe. Your grandpa,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, it may have skipped, but obviously there was some kind of influence that made your grandfather
Yeah.
think like, this is what I should be doing. I
Yeah.
should be like studying law, going to DC and getting
Yeah.
involved like this.
Yeah.
So,
And some reason why my grandmother was like, I'm going to marry you.
yeah.
So it's
I mean-
all coming together.
I mean, literally. So, I mean, it may have like, quote, skipped Cora,
Yeah.
but I think that like they were all in Butler. They
Yeah.
were watching their family do this. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I imagine like if your great grandmother was alive today, she could tell you all the
Oh,
inside
yeah.
scoop on
For
this
sure.
exact situation.
For sure.
All right, let's phone it in. There's a cool connection.
There's a cool connection, and I would like to think that there's a sense of justice based on beliefs that were held about slavery at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and based on a desire to serve the people.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But I'm still just like,
Who knows?
who knows?
I think it's worth talking to your mom about and seeing like
Yeah.
what she remembers.
Yeah, we'll do a follow up maybe.
We'll do a follow-up. Kim, that's it. We have to go eat.
We have to go eat. We
eat.
have to go eat. Thank you for giving me a great story.
You're welcome. Okay, I love you and I kiss you.
I love you. Bye.
Bye.
Low Ancestry is written and produced by Karyn Harding and co-hosted by me, Kim McMasters, with original music and audio engineering by Benjamin Malk. Original cover art was designed by Christina Swanson of Swansong Creative. Resources pertaining to today's episode and a link to the official bibliography can be found in our show notes or at our website, lowancestry.com. All research was conducted by Karyn, but she's been known to be wrong on occasion. So if you'd like to connect with Karyn or even send her a correction, you can email us at connect@lowancestry.com or find us on Instagram at Low Ancestry. Genealogy is, after all, a community effort. Thank you so much for listening, and if you like what you hear, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you, and frankly, we really need this.